Okay, under the hood, I'm gonna check all my hoses. I wanna make sure they're not ripped or torn or have any fluids leaking out of them that are on the motor but haven't reached the ground yet. I'm gonna check all my major components to make sure they're not leaking any fluids that haven't reached the ground yet. I'm gonna check my power steering fluid to make sure it's above the fill line, but if this was dirty, I could unscrew the cap to show the dipstick underneath to check my oil, make sure the cap is on tight and the container isn't leaking any oil. I'm gonna check my oil level to make sure that I'm above the fill line, reinsert it, and make sure that the cap is on tight. I'm gonna check the frame of the tractor. I wanna make sure it's not cracked or welded and I'm not missing any nuts or bolts all the way down. I'm gonna check the belt, make sure that it's got less than 3/4 inch of free play and the belt isn't cracked or frayed or have any damage to it. I'm gonna check all my steering. I'm gonna make sure that the steering arm isn't damaged. There's no damage to the knuckles, no damage to the gearbox like broken nuts or bolts that attach it to the tractor. Make sure the gearbox isn't leaking any fluid. Check the rest of your steering linkage to make sure that all your nuts and bolts, castle nuts, cotter keys aren't missing or damaged. No shiny metal to indicate looseness. I'm gonna check the spring hanger. Make sure it's nice and tight, no looseness to it. The spring mount, same thing, not missing any nuts or bolts, on nice and tight. The leaf springs can't be cracked, shifted, or missing. The U-bolts that hold them on have to be nice and tight, no shiny metal to indicate looseness. Way underneath the U-bolts, you can see the bolts that tighten them down and make them firm. So no shiny metal to indicate looseness or no missing bolts. I'm going to listen to the airline on my brake canister to make sure that it isn't leaking any air. I'm checking the fabric to make sure it's not worn, torn, or damaged. The brake chamber or brake canister can't be cracked or leaking any air. It can't have any damage. It's mounted on by 2 bolts, so I'm making sure there's no shiny metal to indicate looseness or missing bolts. This is the slack adjuster. This is the push rod. I'm making sure that the slack adjuster push rod aren't damaged. No missing parts like these little cotter keys that hold the position of the slack adjuster push rod in place. And I need less than 1 inch of free play. Way inside, I gotta check my brake pads, top and bottom, making sure that the brake pads are more than 1/4 inch thick and that they're not cracked across the pad. I'm checking to make sure there's no oil or debris running in between the pad and the drum. The drum can't be cracked or welded. There's no debris caught in between the drum and the wheel. The wheel isn't cracked or welded anywhere on the wheel. The sidewall doesn't have any cracks, nails, or bulges in it all the way around. I need more than 4 30-seconds tread all the way around, even wear on the tire. The sidewall on the outside isn't cracked or damaged or have any bulges, nails, or bulges. It's mounted onto the rim properly. There's no gaps or bulges on the rim. The rim itself isn't cracked or welded. All my lug nuts, they can't be cracked, rusted, loose, or missing. The hubcap isn't leaking any oil, and I would pop the cap off to check to make sure that there's oil in the chamber. The valve stem and cap can't be missing or damaged, and I would check the tire pressure to make sure that I'm at 110 psi as specified by the tire. I missed one thing under the hood here. I want to check the shock absorber. Got to finish off that suspension. The shock absorber has nuts and bolts on top and bottom. They can't be missing or show any shiny metal to indicate looseness. Also, the shock absorber isn't leaking or sagging. And that is it for this side of the motor. Let me take you to